All right, so the first article that I read was analyzing student achievement. And one of the biggest things that really jumped out to me, grabbed my attention, was the first line, where it basically said that if your students have not learned, have you really taught as a teacher? And this really hit home for me because I had a bunch of classes, especially in high school, where if it was either math or science, but me and my friends in that class basically taught ourselves. The teacher could just sit in the back, wrote lessons, wrote practice plans, and I would have came out with the same grade, the same takeaways. Like I did not learn, and that was really one big thing that made me want to become a teacher was because I felt like a lot of the older teachers, especially, weren't doing a good job at their jobs. Now, many of these teachers that I'm talking about were coaches and had a very coaching approach and coaching orientation. So that has a lot to do with it, but again, that really jumped out at me. The second thing that really jumped out to me in this article was the self-assessment and peer assessment section. So I'm a big think, pair, share guy when it comes to teaching. These are my favorite assessments. I really like it because it gets the students thinking, and it's not a massive group discussion. So for things with just one of their friends or just a small group, they may be more inclined to bring it up, talk about it, instead of in a big group discussion where maybe a student is scared, think they may be embarrassed, especially for younger kids. So I really like these. Also in my undergraduate, we were always doing self-assessments, always doing peer assessments. So it's just also how I've been taught. And one big thing I got out of that section was it was talking about frequent assessment can give the students a big advantage. It can get them to actually understand the topic or the skill. And it talks about how that correlated not just in PE but other like math, science, stuff like that. So from this article, what I'm personally going to take away are some of the suggestions for implementing self-assessment, where it talked about self-assessments at the beginning of class. Like for me, I really like doing the assessments, but sometimes it's hard for me to fit them in, especially with a tight schedule. Like in my my second internship in my undergrad, I only had 30-minute classes. So it was really difficult to just put as much in there as I could. But especially with like the younger kids, like kindergarten, a lot of it was more behavior management, just really getting that in there. And doing it one at the start of class would really get them focused, understanding, and learning. Another one was there was assessing student improvement section where it had 6 things that kind of listed in order, like a good way to do it. And I really liked how it was laid out. The first one was identify what you want students to be able to do. And then the second one was devise a reasonable, objective, and valid method of measuring that performance. Third, it was beforehand measure or use that measure to find out what the students are able to do. The fourth one is teach them what you want them to learn, then measure their improvement. And the last one is use the evidence of improvement or lack thereof to evaluate your teaching. That really just stuck out to me. So the second article, which was the Meltzer article of monitoring the PE learning process. The first thing that really jumped out to me was that the resource management section was tiny. Like there was one small little section, it might have been a paragraph. But from where I'm from, a lot of the schools and school districts in general are very poor for the most part. They don't have much. I know one of my friends in undergrad, their first internship was at a school kind of close to our undergrad, but they had 3 poly spots. As like that was all they had in terms of cones and stuff like that. Other than that, like they had a rack of basketballs, a rack of volleyballs, but other than that, it was really like 3 poly spots. And a lot of the schools that all of us were in, we had to bring equipment from our undergrad to use. Like I know at my school, when we did lacrosse, I had to bring almost everything, including the goals. When we did soccer, basketball, that was normal. But when we branched out a little bit, they usually do not have what you need. So that was really sad that it was so small of a section because for a lot of teachers, that is a big part of their lessons and like getting things like that they need. And that really would help for the evaluate. That's more to evaluate. So for the instructional cues section, I am really bad at this. And so I really took away that like keeping them brief, keeping them in order, and like just something to remember, something that they like, and even helping them create their own cues is really good. So that's definitely something I'm going to take away. Also, there was a performance feedback section. I am terrible at performance feedback. I'm very vague half the time. I'm thinking about my lesson. I'm thinking about what I'm doing next. I'm not thinking about this student at this time. So a lot of times I'll be like, Jimmy, good job. Where in undergrad, especially at my first internship, I would always get docked points for that. And so that's something I'm still constantly fighting as a teacher. I'm definitely better than I used to be at this particular subject, but it's something that it's really nice to keep thinking about, having in the back of your mind. There was one section that I really liked about the performance feedback. It said high rates of specific feedback. And that's really nice because when I think of it, I'm either just kind of going with it and doing a lot, or I'm just being super specific once or twice. But I need to get that higher up, so it really stuck out to me. For the last article, which was the research to teaching in PE article, the first thing that really jumped out to me was the researchers looking at how time was actually used in PE and how a small proportion of the time was actually used to being active and getting involved. So I know one thing said that only 30% of time in PE the students are being involved in motor activities, and only 15% of the time are they at the appropriate level of level of engagement and where they need to be, heart rate, that kind of thing. So that's really sad. That means roughly 85% of the time they're in PE, they're not where they need to be, doing what they need to be doing. So that really stuck out to me, and immediately when I thought of this, I thought of the sport ed model and how, personally, I'm a really big fan of the sport ed model. I've used it in many different situations, different classes. It's always worked great for me. I actually had a third grade class one time that I could not get them moving to save my life. I implemented a sport ed model. Everyone was involved. Everyone was doing their roles. They were getting their teammates there, because a big thing of that is social responsibility, being on time, everyone being at school, because the students want to win, and that really helps. It also really helped that I randomly did the teams, so they were playing with people who maybe they weren't great friends with before, but by the end they were talking, they were engaging. It was really good, and everyone was moving and active. Let's see. And so that's what I took out of that article. So when it comes to questions, for the first article, I have 2 questions. The first one is, why do many teachers still believe that assessments are synonymous with grading? This might be because I recently went through college, and what I've been a part of and the theory behind it is many assessments, even if you're not grading, always assess, where, I don't know, I guess that's still weird to me how a lot of teachers don't feel that way. The second question I have about Article 1 are, what are some ways to slowly push veteran custodial teachers into using more assessments? I know we've talked about this in class, but I'm still kind of fuzzy in that area, especially looking back at some of the teachers I've had, especially in my K through 12 days. It would have taken everything to get them to even want to do a self-assessment, slowly push anything in there. They were totally coaching oriented, and that's just I'm just not with it on that. For the second article, I had one question, and it goes back to the resource management. Why does the article not go into greater detail on this? It's just an issue with me because back home, we always were talking about how being creative, collaborating, getting all this different information from others, just using what you have to the fullest. And then the last article, my question for that one is, in one part of it, it says vaguely, it's basically proven that the more experienced teachers are better planners, and they're better at getting the students involved. If that's the case, why is there a better perception, or why is it widely believed that the older teachers are the ones who are more likely to roll the ball out and more likely to be custodial? I understand that they probably were taught, and when they were in college came up with the traditional ways, but even with that being said, to me, I feel like they would have changed their ways, especially working with others, going to development, that kind of thing. So it's just really weird for me.